Good evening. Welcome in daily UPSC editorial audio program. Fossil will rule Times of India. For India, a bit of a cap out. The Economic Times, keeping it relevant. The Hindu. Now the full editorial. Fossil will rule the Times of India. COP28's words on a green transition are predictably uncut by harsh economic truths. The the World Meteorological Organization confirmed just ahead of COP28 that 2023 will end up as the hottest year in human history. No country is left unaffected, nor is any of them really surprised that yet another UN jamboree that ended with yet another wishy-washy climate deal. Historic ambiguity. Historic ambiguity. COP's stock take calls on countries to contribute to transition away from fossil fuels in envisioning a future decline for coal, oil and gas. This language is needed historic, but it is also very deliberatively loose. This is for two main reasons. Green technologies are far from being ready to run the global economic engine, and rich countries is spearheading these innovations remain resistant to giving fair support to developing countries. Rich hypocrisy. IMF reports that fossil fuel subsidies actually surged to a record $7 trillion last year. Rich countries did not roll back subsidies when energy prices dropped during the pandemic. Plus, they rebounded to coal in response to the Ukraine war. Today, some of them are considering carbon tax policies that will effectively penalize imports from developing countries. Ignore reality. Ahead of the Dubai meet, UNEP also brought out its emission gap report on the 1.5 degree centigrade pathway. Nothing the need for a cut in predicted 2030 greenhouse gas emission of 42% on mitigation challenges in low and middle income countries. It makes the point that cost of capital here are up to 7 times higher than in the US and Europe. Tech pipe dream. The COP28 text stays away from specificities specificities of cutting emissions, but points to technologies such as carbon capture and low carbon hydrogen production as possible saviors. The problem is that these could easily turn out to be expensive wrong turns. US climate envoy John Kerry gave an honest voice to doubts about current knowledge when he suggested a couple of years ago that the bulk of the emissions cuts needed by mid-century will come from technologies we don't yet have. This is real progress being made on renewables today. But the economic imperatives of fossil fuel use has not weakened. For India, a bit of cop out. The Economic Times. The just concluded Dubai Climate Conference COP28 marked a pivotal moment in global climate actions for the first time, transitioning away from fossil fuel figures in the in the outcome document, and there is a stronger recognition of the urgency to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, yet much more needed to be done. For the UAE and COP28, President Sultan Al Jaber also ADNOC it was a chance to demonstrate that an oil and gas economy can deliver for the climate constrained world. The UAE succeeded somewhat. Progress now depends on securing financing for energy transition for the developing world without stemming development and ensuring their climate resilient growth. This is where India could have played an important support role to the UAE. In Dubai, India was low-key working in like-minded developing countries, Saudi Arabia and other members of the Arab group and China, instead of building on its voice of the global south, part of the G20 presidency. India situated its COP28 engagement in its relationship with the UAE and other OPEC and non-OPEC countries. India succeeded in securing its space to rely on coal for energy security. However, it failed to articulate the need of the global south beyond UN climate needs. India is proactive about its aggressive renewable energy and green hydrogen programs, though the International Solar Alliance and Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. It engages with Africa, Latin America, and small island states. Its developmental needs allow for a common cause with much of the global south, especially on adaptation and loss and damage. It must leverage common interest to be bridge builder that fills the divide on global climate action, keeping it relevant. The Hindu COP meeting must use climate science to promote justice and equity. Since 1995, when the first of the United Nations Conference of Parties (COP) was organized, it has undergone a remarkable shift in character from stuffy, closed-door meetings peopled by bureaucrats and technocrats. They have morphed into a carnival. Officialdom has, of course, grown uh, with the UN Climate Secretariat bursting at the seams with reams of subsidiary bodies, working groups, and intricately convoluted agenda items. But this has been accompanied by the mm, burgeoning of activist group, indigenous group, big and small businesses, consultancies, traders, and a vast media presence. It is on the one hand fair to conclude that this is a welcome development, and due to the growing awareness of how an anthropogenic climate change amplified by centuries of industrialization poses an existential threat to humanity. Climate denialists, vociferous and significant in power corridors even until a decade ago, are now re- relegated to the obscurity of the darknet, along with flat earthers and their ranks filled by pervens and the pivoting merchants of the fossil fuel era who see opportunity in the uh, messianic espousal of renewable energy. There is no country today that will not publicly affirm its faith in the scientific assessment that greenhouse gas emissions must be contained and drastically to cap the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and yet it has never inspired any sense of urgency to cut fossil fuel use, the dominant source of GHGs, that it has taken nearly 3 decades for COP to acknowledge this fact, as laid out in the Dubai Consensus, suggests that political expediency and strategic second guessing has unfortunately weaponized even climate science. Thus, countries responsible for most of the human and emitted carbon point to record temperature and their links to rising emissions when arguing for reining in emissions from developing countries. However, they are loath to accept this link when developing and island nations demand funds as reparations for devastations already wrecked by climate change. The loss and damage fund, which received commitments worth $75 million and therefore cheered as a COP28 success has only been approved on the condition that it not be considered as compensation for historical carbon pollution. Related to this is the larger concern that COP meetings are demand as historic only when they insert new work phases, phase out, phase down transition on cutting emissions, but are banal when they consider how little money and technology has been channeled for fossil fuel de-addiction. It is time that future meetings use the science to promote justice and equity and strengthen faith in what is now one of the few working multilateral processes. Thank you.